Great. Good evening. Today is March 2nd, 2021, and this is the special meeting of the Litchfield Elementary School Governing Board. This meeting is officially called to order. We are starting this evening on our agenda item 2A, our consent agenda. So I will entertain a motion to to approve our consent agenda and or pull any items off if people want to discuss further.
I move to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
I second. Thank you. Great. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda has been approved. Thank you. That takes us back all the way to item 4A, the staffing and class sizes to include Digital Learning Academy. Ms. Wendy Qualls will be giving us that presentation.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Governing Board, Superintendent Gunning. So tonight you have before you the planning staffing for the 21-22 school year. To determine the staffing, we first start with the students that are enrolled on the 100th day, which was January 20th of 2021. Those students are rolled up into the new school year database into the next grade level. For class sizes, the determination is based on the regulation IIB-RB. This regulation applies to schools, so the children attending in an actual physical school, and also the DLA program for next year. So kinder and first grade, 25 students, second and third grade, 27, fourth and fifth, 28, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, 32 students. That is the same as the current class sizes for the current year. To date, we have increased 50 students in the current year since the 100th day. Open enrollment applications are due on March 15th, so we are still receiving additional open enrollment applications. We have started to go through those just internally to process those and updating the numbers for the new year so that we still have a good idea or an updated idea of the staffing needed. Also, our student information department has been working nights and weekends to open up appointments for parents to come in and register, not only for the current year, but also for next year. And we also have online registration available for parents too. So for next year, since with the first day we came back to school on February 22nd, for next year, we do have an additional 112 students that came in and registered. So class sizes for next year will be continued to be monitored based on the most recent information we have for the students that are enrolled for the 21-22 school year. In addition to the staff based on the above formula, there are also 5 additional teachers to fill positions at our highly performing schools. These highly performing schools receive additional state funding called results-based funding, and that funding will be used to pay for these 5 additional positions. Any questions on staffing?
Can you remind me of the schools that received school results-based funding?
So results-based funding for this is Litchfield, Verado Elementary.
Sure Scott Libby, right?
Scott Libby, yes.
And could you mind speaking just a little closer to the microphone because it's very echoey in here.
Okay.
Sorry, I hope it's not. Bend it over.
Those are the only 3 campuses?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question. I know when we went to online this year and we allowed our DLA classes to be larger than our normal approved sizes. Can you tell me more as to why we would want to keep those, or are there pros and cons, or what's the thought process behind DLA being the same as a standard classroom in person?
Mrs. DeCoste.
Good evening, Governing Board. The answer to that keeping the class sizes the same in DLA as the rest of the classes was that the feedback that we received from parents of students in DLA and also the teachers in the DLA was that the classes were too large. And so we thought it would be more manageable to keep them in line and more equitable to keep all class sizes across the district the same.
Okay, sorry, I was waiting. I thought someone else was gonna ask. In the kindergarten class at Verado Elementary School, I think that's Verado. It looks like we have the class size is 15. It's not highlighted as results-based funding, like that's what we have another teacher, but it looks like based on our class size and based on other class sizes from other schools, you could only have 3 teachers there instead of 4. Are we expecting additional enrollment that we're sort of holding space for?
We are. That is one of the schools that we have a really high kindergarten open enrollment for.
Okay,
So I was trying to front load that position so that we'd be able to approve some kindergarten.
I understand. Okay, so you have some data that's telling us that we need to make sure we have space there to
Yes.
hold the new kids. Okay, I understand. Anyone else have any questions, comments? No? Wow. Conversation about staffing and class sizes and we don't have any comments. I'm surprised. Okay. All right, well then I will, if there's no more discussion, I will entertain a motion to approve the staffing and class sizes, including DLA for next year.
I
I
motion.
just have one comment first.
Sure.
I mean, what are really, it doesn't seem to me like there's really any options, or it's just based on the realities of the situation, correct?
I mean, you could adjust the class size for classes. I mean, you could put more or less kids in a class, which would determine the number of teachers that we have.
I understand that, but I mean, it would change other parameters that maybe we don't have control over, like how much money we have.
Correct. It will not change the parameters of the money that we have. We just have a policy of how many students that we want to see in every class. We have the ability to change that. I mean, that's not the discussion tonight, but I mean, we have the ability to change that. So we're just basically saying, yes, we still agree with that idea that those are the number of kids that we want in every class and this staffing plan, which is based on not increasing those class size numbers.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
I move to approve staffing and class sizes to include DLA as presented.
I second.
Great. There's no more discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Wendy. Well, I think you're going to be up for a while, so sorry about that. I'll leave my thank you until the end. Item 4B, open enrollment excess capacity for fiscal year 2022.
Thank you, Madam President. So in our open enrollment regulations, it discusses the need to set excess capacity limits. So to determine those, we figure out how many students we currently have enrolled in the program, same as we did for staffing, roll those up to the next year, and assume that anyone on open enrollment is going to stay at the school that they open enrolled in or are going to return to us from out of district. So the excess capacity would be any open seats above the students we're expecting to return, plus a small growth factor. So we know that we have some growing areas, and we also just have transition in different schools. Even if there's not really new construction, you have new families coming in, and also a little bit of seats available for those that decide to return to us that weren't here in the current year. So considering that information, the grid has the number of openings that we would have for any new out-of-district students coming into the district, or any in-district students that want to transfer between our schools. Again, this information changes daily based on who comes in to enroll. And so throughout the year, administration would still just accept resident and non-resident students through open enrollment as space permits. Any questions on excess capacity?
I have two questions. One, I mean, I think this makes it very clear. I just want to say it out loud that there will be 0 open enrollments for any special education students this year, according to this chart. There will be none allowed for any reason.
Based on our current student count, no, there would not be special education
Able to do that.
from out of district coming in.
Okay.
We still could have some students transfer within our schools if they are a resident, but they want to attend another school. As long as we have the staff available at that campus to service their needs.
Okay. And the second question, I don't know if you know the answer to this. It just seems kind of odd that there's like 0 fifth grade spots anywhere, but there's scattered everywhere else. Did we just have an enormous 4th grade class this year that that all the classes are full, or how did we come to that?
So in the 5th grade, it just happened on the staffing to work out that way. Our classes were pretty well filled to
Mhm.
begin with. So it just worked out that way.
Okay. Good. Any other questions or comments? No? Great. All right. Thank you, Wendy. I will entertain a motion for open enrollment excess capacity.
I motion to approve open enrollment excess capacity for fiscal year 2022.
I will second.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is item 4C, approval of professional memberships. Wendy will also present that to us.
Thank you, Madam President. In preparing for the 21-22 school year, the board is required to approve any employee benefit. One of the employee benefits we offer our administrators is professional memberships. One of the most effective ways to keep current and best practices and new research is to become an active member of a professional organization in the field. There are several professional organizations providing support and professional development opportunities to foster both personal and professional development. The supervisor may approve an administrator to join a professional organization, the budget, and then pay the fees. The fees would be paid from a school or department's budget allocation. So we're requesting tonight for our employees to be able to be members of the listed organizations. Any questions?
Wendy, do you know about what the approximate total is that we pay for memberships? Wild guess.
I didn't look that up. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
I can get that information to you, but I didn't look it up. It's not a lot. The ASA is probably be the largest one. Most of our principals and assistant principals belong to that. ASBO, I believe our fee is $175, and there's 3 or 4 of us that belong to that. The others is just a person here and there.
Yeah, obviously transportation administrators is,
Right.
limited. Okay. All right. No, I think it's very worthwhile. I learn a lot from the professional organizations from a CPA standpoint, as well as from the associations that I'm in as a school board member. So I think it's well worth that. I just wasn't sure what the scope of this request was.
I agree as well. I think professional organizations, especially in a time right now where people are relying on colleagues and other people, how they're doing in other places and things like that is really important. I just want to clarify one thing you said about the budget. It comes from their individual campus budgets and or department budgets that are at the district level. So it's not one big pool of money, that's spent on.
So it comes from their supervisor's budget. So the principals would come from Jody's budget
Mhm.
for the initial, trying to think, which we pay for the ASA membership.
Mhm.
And then if they want to participate in any of the other ones, it would come from their budget.
So it's kind of scattered about, it's not just one budget line item at the district level. Everyone, if they are interested in participating in additional things, they just take it out of their kids' budget. Okay. I understand.
That way they're prioritizing within their budget.
Sure. No, I think that makes sense. Any other questions or comments for Wendy? Great. All right. I will move that we approve the professional memberships for the next year.
I second.
Great. All those in favor?
I
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Motion carries. Moving on to 5A, fiscal year 2022 budget planning presentation. This will be Superintendent Gunning and Wendy.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we wanted to kind of walk you through our steps that we have gone through this year for planning for the 21-22 school year. Next slide. And I am your presenter, Superintendent Gunning. The first thing that we wanted to kind of walk you through are where we've started and some of the things that we went through. So one of the first things that we started working on right away was a marketing plan, a plan to not only impact for our children who would potentially return in this school year, but also for the next school year. And we did a hashtag, there's no place like LESD. We have postcards that'll be dropping this week and other different opportunities, as well as even having a booth at the art festival this weekend. Our restructuring team, we pulled together to collaborate with various cohorts to give us some innovative ideas and really looking and reflecting on different models and potential cuts that we could do. We did all of that in alignment with our strategic plan. We pulled the strategic plan out first, went through and looked at each of the pillars, and then talked about what held us strong in those areas. And then we also went through and identified nice to haves and have to haves to sustain and to be able to meet those goals. Through that, we did a lot of conversations. They took information back, did a lot of talking, brainstorming of ideas, and pulling back together admin council to finalize some suggestions. Then we prepared information sessions for all the staff members where we educated them on all of the departments, department structures, and then even kind of talking through some future potential options and providing a survey to give them some items to rank order for us. And then tonight we'll be presenting some of those ideas for you, as well as an interactive worksheet for you to explore. That will be your homework on exploring different options that we potentially could have. Next slide. In review, I know a lot of you have seen all of the different brainstorm ideas, because I think we shared those ideas a few Fridays ago. So we looked at everything from reallocating positions based on student count. So kind of looking at the size of the campus. Next slide. Determining, even looking at possibility of middle school specials based on number of teachers and students, semester specials, reevaluating the need for our security guards. Next slide. Phasing out some full-time benefit incentives, meaning through attrition, not eliminating them currently. Maintaining our school budget allocations. Remember, we made that cut going into this year, so sustaining that cut into the next year. And these are just all the ideas that they came up with, and increasing target class size. Next slide. Create efficiencies within operations by consolidating deliveries, continuing to streamline processes, continuing to transition to paperless processes, reducing electric, water, and fuel usage, and to continue to evaluate positions as needed through attrition to determine whether the position would need to be closed or not, or could potentially be closed. Looking at reduction of salary and benefits by reducing possibility of performance awards, 2-day furloughs for 10 to 12-month employees, increasing employee share of health and dental premiums, the number of paid holidays, pay increases, and changing of work calendars for new custodians. Looking at other opportunities for charging for advertisement within our school campuses, offering half-day kindergarten, offering staff pre-ordered lunches, expanding our community ed program offerings, participate in a DES subsidy program, transitioning to central serving kitchens, and streamlining food options. So we wanted to make sure that we just kind of touched on and kind of had to just put out every single thing possible that we could look at. Then we conducted a staff feedback survey. And as you can see, we had a great participation as well as a well-balanced participation. Those are all of the different departments and schools who participated in the survey. Next slide. We had over 500 certified staff members participate and over 300 classified staff. Next slide. These were the questions, or not the questions, I should say. These were the options that were listed for them, and then we asked them to rank order. And they went in this order, like heating and cooling classrooms that are not used, which might sound obvious, but thinking like you can't just freely spread out, because we all like to spread out as educators and go into other extra rooms when possible. So kind of thinking about that, the purchasing of Nearpod and Castify, reducing the number of paid holidays, eliminating Teledoc, the dental insurance and benefit packages, looking at those, increasing employee share of the premiums, no pay increase for all staff, implementing a 2-day furlough, and a reduction in career development award stipends. In this slide, what you can see is kind of how in rank order from 1 through 9, how folks felt about those suggestions. So number 1, that they felt, yes, we could definitely do and support and get behind is not heating and cooling unused classrooms. Then was the Nearpod, eliminating Teledoc, the implementation of the 2-day furlough, the dental insurance, the reduction of paid holidays, career development, increasing the employee share of premiums, and the least favorite was no pay increase. This is just another version of that same data and same information for you. Next slide. And of course, as we're trying to proactively plan, we're hoping for the best, prepared for the worst, and unsurprised by anything in between. We're still waiting for a lot of decisions to come in regards to our state and federal funding. So we still have a lot of unknowns as we begin to prepare, and we greatly appreciate your input in this process as we go through. I know it's making really tough decisions, and hoping that a lot of them won't be necessary as we get closer to the end of March and beginning of April. And I think I'm the beginning of the next presentation.
Can we ask some questions before
Sure.
you hand it off? Going back to the very beginning of the presentation, I'm not sure which slide it is, maybe 3 or 4. I think it was the first one in the restructuring team's recommendation. Allocate the following positions based on the school student count. So that's the coaches, reading specialists, ELL coordinators, et cetera. How is it currently done?
So
Is it not currently allocated on student count, or every campus just gets one no matter, or however many positions, just based on being a campus, not if you have a certain number of students?
So currently it was 1 reading specialist, 1 instructional coach, a half behavior, and then ELL is needed, generally a half. And what we found is when we set those amounts and just being a full, most of our schools our elementary campuses were generally between 650 and 800 to 900 kids. So now we're looking at campuses half that size. And so we really wanted to look at staffing and how things have changed over the years, and if we could reduce any of the support on the campus for those that are smaller.
Okay, so I just want to make sure. So instructional coaches, there was 1 per campus. Behavior coaches, there was a half, so they were shared between 2 campuses. 1 reading specialist, one ELL coordinator?
A half, generally it was a half ELL coordinator.
Okay, so again,
That could-
shared.
It could vary a little different if you had a campus that had extremely high ELL students and one with low.
Okay,
It could be a little bit higher or lower.
okay. And then student advisors?
Student advisors were 2 per middle school,
Okay. Assistant principals
1 per
at
campus,
the middle school level, right? And registrars.
1 per campus. So at our schools, we have the office manager full-time and a full-time registrar currently. And then the schools can use their aid allocation hours to add additional positions to the front office if they would like to have a receptionist or an attendance clerk or another office position.
Okay, so this recommendation includes not the attendance clerk or office manager, any of those positions, but just the registrar would
Just-
be based on. So there, what would be the cutoff point that the schools would no longer have a registrar?
So they would always have a registrar. At 500, it would be, below 500 would be a half.
Okay,
And the registrar position had always been full-time. Even when we opened up central registration, we kept that position full-time, again, because most of our schools were larger. Now the initial registration is done at the district office. And then the registrar on the campus is following up on collecting paperwork or any other items they need to do. But the majority of the intake and withdrawal is done at the district level now.
okay. So we're potentially going from 1 to a half, which would be shared between 2 campuses.
Yes.
Right, okay. Understand. I'm not sure if we're going to talk about this in a minute or not. I know there was another supplemental sheet on the middle school specials as well. Can you, I know we have this chart here. Can you walk through exactly what that means in terms of, it's not just the student count, it's right, it's based on the number of team teachers, because they're using that specials period as their collaborative, sort of teaching or PLC time. And so can you explain this chart that we were given just so that we can understand how the proposed allocation would happen now, because it's different than what we currently have?
So the middle school concept started with 5.5 specials on each campus. And again, at that time, most of the teams were maybe 8 teachers per grade level, 8 to 10. For the current year, we had a couple of grades at Western Sky and Wigwam Creek that needed 12 teachers. And so they chose to have 3 4-man teams. In order to have coverage for all these specials, we had to add an additional special at each of those campuses. That's why you have the column that shows it's currently 6.5. Is that those positions were added specifically to have that 3 4-man team concept. So the 5.5 allows similar specials between each campus. If we were to allocate specials based on the number of teachers at each grade level, that could go down. So for example, if you had a school that has 7 teachers, they probably have a 3-man and a 4-man team. And so to allow that team to collaborate, you would only need 4 positions, not 5.5.
And these are both the full year and the half year specials. I mean, the various positions that offer both full and half. Is that correct?
So the 5.5, it would be up to the school to determine which were full year and which were half. But in order to make it work where you're reducing the number of specials, and the idea is that you would have band for a semester at one campus and then band at the next semester at the other campus. So you would eliminate that full year special.
Okay.
And it would move to another campus. That's the idea, that if we went with reducing the specials, how that would work.
Okay, so if we, in this last column where it's sort of what the future might hold, if you did it actually number of teachers per grade, you would have one campus that has 3, let's say, and one that would have 5 based on, their teacher count and their student count. it seems that it wouldn't necessarily be a matter of, okay, you're going to get banned this semester, you're going to get banned that semester. It's you're going to have band and you're not going to have band. Because if one has 3 and one has 5, there's some that are going to be offered at one and not offered at the other. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. One other just quick clarification on the full-time benefits for crossing guard. Jody, you said that we'd be phasing that out. So basically, as those people either accepted different positions or left the district or whatever, they would not be replaced in the same way, but we wouldn't be taking away benefits from people that are currently staying. Correct. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments on this presentation? Okay. Great. Thank you both. Next on the agenda, item 5B is our budget discussion. Again, with Jody and Wendy. Thank you.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we are now going to get into our budget discussions for the 21-22 school year. It'll be myself and Wendy. I have just a short little section on this one. This aligns to our strategic plan in relation to our finances and resources, along with increasing our stakeholder knowledge and understanding of school funding. We wanted to share our timeline. So tonight, we were looking at several different things. Originally, we were planning to bring you a reduction in force policy and procedure. We already have that in place, but we feel very confident that we will not have to go through a RIF process with the attrition the natural attrition that we have. So that was good news. Tonight you've approved some staffing numbers along with class sizes, which will help us in looking at our open enrollment and kind of setting the stage. Tomorrow we'll be meeting to approve the contract language for our teachers and all of our certified staff. And then on the 16th, we'll come back. You'll have some homework tonight to take home and you'll have a due date of your homework. And then on the 16th, we'll come back to approve our insurance plans, approve salary reduction plan, which is an annual process that we do every year. So not to panic anyone. Approve our work calendars, and then kind of going into the final discussions of the budget. And then on March 30th, we had a study session already scheduled. We'll schedule also a smaller special meeting to approve the projected budget based on all of your feedback, as also approving our issuance of our certified contracts for our teachers. That gives us a little more room, more time for you all to get us feedback, and also more time to see how our enrollment grows as we get closer.
Thank you, Superintendent Gunning. So first, I want to review the projected budget information. So I presented in the last couple meetings about how the funding is calculated. So this is the next step. Previously, we talked about how student enrollment impacted the budget amount. Now we're going to go through the remaining steps. So the maintenance and operation budget is based on current year enrollment. Current year enrollment, meaning next year's enrollment, will be what will be determining our actual budget. The funding amount I did increase by $32.82 since the previous presentations. In the current year, the governor's plan for 20% by 2020 included money that was in our Proposition 301 funds. That amount is now supposed to go into our base level in M&O. So I increased the base level for that amount. I did not include inflation. The state budget has not been determined and finalized, so I did not include inflation. So based on our student count and weights, we generate 55 million in budget. The maintenance and operation budget is based on prior year enrollment, which would mean the current year we're in will be determining the maintenance and operation budget, or sorry, the override for next year. I again increased that funding per student to include the amount that will be coming from the previously paid from 301. So that now has the override at 9.2 million. So you add those two amounts along with an audit amount. The state does reimburse us for our financial audit. It's a couple years in arrears, but they do reimburse us for our financial audit. Transportation is the funding that would be generated based on the miles and the number of students that we're transporting. The budget carry forward of 5.6 million is what I anticipate will carry forward in our M&O budget from this current year into 21-22. We'll be transferring some of the K-3 reading money that is budgeted, or the way it is allocated in the state budget is in maintenance and operation. We'll transfer 50,000 of that to capital to be used for instructional materials. Several years ago, we entered into a lease agreement for energy management systems, and that lease payment comes out of an energy and water fund. So we'll be transferring money from maintenance and operation into that fund to pay the lease payment. So in the end, the projected budget for next year is $72.6 million. So next we look at our projected expenditures. If I take the amount that we have spent this year in M&O and also grant funds, because we did receive the education stabilization grant. So some of those expenditures for salary were paid from that grant fund. We'll be at $76 million. Known increases for next year is retirement contribution. The retirement contribution will be going up for employees and the employer. And the amount will go from 12.22% to 12.41%. We anticipate some utility increases. Our property and casualty insurance generally increases around 25,000 a year. Also, we plan for our professional development awards to increase. So we have employees that are currently on level 1, 2A, and 2B. We anticipate they all will go up a level and pay that out of next year's budget. So 206,000. If we call for an override election, it'll be around $85,000. So in total, just under $77 million. You'll notice what is missing from here is health insurance increase. We received great information on Monday morning that we have no increase. Our claim costs were relatively low, even with the COVID claims. And so we will not see an increase in those for next year. So when we take the estimated budget revenue coming in of 72.6 million and subtract out 77 for our expenditures, we're over by $4.3 million. Now remember, in the amount of the 72,000 included 5.6 million of carryover from this year. So we like to carry forward that amount just so that we have the budget available. So to restore that 5.6 and have that available to go into our 22-23 year, we're looking at just under $10 million in reductions. So before we get to your interactive spreadsheet, I want to just touch on some of the things we've talked about in the past meetings, just to refresh our memory. So we know the governor's budget has been out, the House's budget's out, the Senate's out, and they're now negotiating. But the governor's budget does include the 1.22% for inflation, and the Senate's budget also includes inflation. So again, I didn't include it, but it will be an option to consider in your spreadsheet. The second round of the Coronavirus Response Relief Supplemental Appropriations, it's called ESSER 2. Last time we knew we were going to receive it, and I estimated about $3.2 million. We now know it will be $3,186,088. The allowable uses are expenditures due to COVID-19, addressing learning loss among students. We could do facility repairs and improvements to enable safe operations of the schools, It also can be used for inspecting, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, upgrade projects to improve indoor air quality. The President Biden did have an executive order for reopening and continuing operations of schools. The $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. Friday, the House of Representatives passed it. So we're still waiting to hear for sure what would be in that and then how it would be allocated to schools. I anticipate by mid-March and hopefully by the end, before we're approving contracts, we'd have an estimate of the amount that we'd be receiving. Proposition 208 was approved by the voters November of 2020. The distribution of those funds will be in June, on June 30th and December 31st of each year. Most likely, we will see some of that revenue available July of 2022, and then again in January of 23. The distribution is going to be proportionate to the district's weighted student count. There are still a couple of lawsuits pending on this. Do we have any questions before we get to the worksheets?
My only question for clarification is what you're really telling, just tell me if this is right or wrong. What you're really saying is the numbers we're looking at here are worst case scenario. Because you don't have inflation included in there. You don't have, there's a lot of things we don't know yet that would potentially be in our favor. You don't know what those are. So this, in your best estimate, is worst case.
Yes.
I've got a question. The target cost savings for fiscal year 21-22. So we have a budget shortfall of 4 million, 4.3, and a budget carryover of 5.6. So target cost savings, does that mean how much we've got to cut, or I'm not quite understanding?
So yes, that would be to get us back to where we started this current year at, and to hopefully end next year similar. It would be just under $10 million. And as Ms. Marianne mentioned, this I believe would be close to our worst case scenario, especially when we consider the state budget not being approved, not knowing what additional funds will be included in that budget, and also the federal funding.
I have a question about the ESSER 2 funds. Are those included in this $4.3 million?
So ESSER 2. So
I mean, we know we're getting them.
we
right?
know we are getting it,
Right.
but no, I have not considered taking any of our current expenditures to put over to that fund, because again, the same thing, you'd want to reconsider that in your maintenance and operation budget again in the future when you no longer have the federal assistance. So trying to keep us on track with our maintenance and operation and using those federal funds as supplemental, or knowing that we are using it to backfill the maintenance and operation. So that is not included in that.
Okay. Just left me as soon as it got here. Okay. In terms of timing, I want to address a few things that, you know, the comments on the surveys and things like that that have been taken in terms of timing, because you just brought it up and you said, you know, we really don't know what we don't know yet. There's a couple of different pools of money that may become available to us that we just don't know and probably won't for a few months. Explain the budgeting process and time frame in terms of, you know, if we get money in September of next year, I'm just totally making that up, that doesn't affect how we plan for the budget right now. We are required to do certain things right now to make sure that our budget is going to work no matter what, whether those come in or not. So some of these cost saving measures that we're talking about might never happen, but some of them most likely will have to happen, because whether money comes in down the road or not, we have to plan on the money that we know that we have. And because that's not a dedicated source of funding, we have to kind of plan for the worst case scenario. Can you just kind of talk about what that means and what the timeline is for the specific decision making? Because I think that's a question that people have, is if there's more money coming, why don't we just wait and figure it out later? That's not an option, and I just want you to explain why.
Yes. So there's several deadlines and regulations that we need to comply with. One is issuing contracts to our teachers. We have a deadline of when we need to offer them contracts. So we want to make sure that we're physically making great decisions when we're issuing those contracts. But then things can change and we can add stipends or other items. We have to approve pay amounts by June 30th. So no matter what we do, we'd have to have it approved by June 30th for any pay or benefits that we're going to incur, unless the approval or the receipt of that money comes after June 30th. So if we did receive additional funding in September, let's say, there is proposed language in the teacher contracts that would allow us to then approve a supplemental pay for them to distribute that funds out. Also, as we go through this budgeting process, the teacher contract is the first one that we need to get out, and then the administrators, and then our classified staff. And over time, as we learn more, there's some items that we may say on the 16th that we would need to consider to save costs by doing X. By the time we are in May, if we no longer need to do that cost savings, we could take that back off and say, we don't need to do this item. We now know we have the funds to do it. So definitely changing from this point forward based on the funding that we receive and information we receive. But so it will not be like final done. It's just our starting point in trying to meet different regulations and requirements of times of issuing contracts.
Can you also address the carry forward and why that's so important and what it's used for? I know we talked about it many times and we're actually lucky that we have it. I know there's some districts that would love to be able to do that. And we've just been really fiscally responsible up to this point, in great part to you and the rest of the staff. So can you just explain why that's important? It's a lot of money. And so when you're thinking about, cutting other things to make sure that we have that is a long-term strategy that we've had for a long time. So can you just explain why it's important and what we do with that money?
So it is important just to have like your savings account. It's basically our savings account. So that if, for example, this year when our enrollment went down and your funding's all based on enrollment, we had a safety net to be able to still move forward and employ everyone that we had. We lost folks through attrition, but we did not go in and RIF positions. So that just allows us the ability to adapt to any negative impacts that come our way.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions on this presentation? Okay.
No, let's get to the spreadsheet.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Kim wants to get to the spreadsheet, Wendy.
All right. So Amy did print out copies for you, so it's a little easier to follow along. So you'll notice on the spreadsheet, there's a color coding up in the far right corner so that if there is a blue cell, that means that you can enter the number of days or a dollar amount. The green cells, you'll be able to enter a 1 if you would like to implement that cost savings item, or a 0 to not implement it. There's a summary at the top that will change as you make decisions and enter amounts so that you'll be able to see if we're trying to save 9.9 million, what adjustments you've made and the impact. And there's also the difference there so you can see as you get closer to 0. So I just want to talk through the items that are here for your input. So to make sure we all understand each of them. So first we have a section of what was on the cost saving survey. So we have the energy conservation measures, the purchase of the Nearpod, and reduce the number of paid holidays. And I've listed out each calendar for you that actually receives paid holidays. And also in your packet, there's a summary of what days those are. And then also a draft of our work calendars so that you can look even farther and see what is the first day of work for folks? What's the last day? What breaks do they have? Are they paid? Are they unpaid? So I wanted to give you as much information as I could. So those work calendars will come back to you probably on the 16th for approval.
Wendy, can you tell me more about Nearpod and Screencastify? I know those are technology pieces that I think we're using with remote learning or we're using with remote learning, but can you tell me a little bit more about those?
So I will try, and I may need to rely on Mrs.
Oh,
Dakota.
okay.
Sorry. So Screencastify, I can tell you, is a program that allows them to record their lessons and then be used later.
Okay.
Nearpod, I know, has to do with lessons. And they do have another module that we are considering for DLA, which is also includes specials.
Okay.
So we did purchase it for the online. program.
Okay, and we're really thinking here that we wouldn't need those in our standard, schools because we would be in-person learning.
Correct. The next item is to discontinue the Teledoc program. We learned last week that the $24,000 that we invested in Teledoc, the estimated savings is over $240,000 from folks not going to the emergency room, urgent care, or even their primary doctor. They're able to call any time of the day or night and get prescriptions and go down to the drugstore and pick them up. So that it's about a $10 savings for every dollar we spent. For the dental insurance, our current rate's the $394.32, which would remain the same for next year. In the blue cell, you can enter an amount if you would like to have the employee pay a portion of that, and that would go into the total for you. And then also to increase the employee's share for the premium on health insurance. Mrs. Sanders provided a scheduling here for you of comparing districts around us to see what their benefits are for you to look at. So no performance pay increase for all employees. Some refer that to our cost of living because generally we have just one increase, which is through performance pay. In the past, we did see other increases with the governor's funding and the maintenance and maintenance and operations override. The administrative recommendations are at the end of this presentation in gray, and that does include a 1% increase for every position in the district. Implement.
Okay, wait, I'm sorry. Before you say that one more time, it says no performance pay increase for all employees' cost of living. So what you're saying is that includes the 1% increase as well as performance pay?
So no, the 1% we would normally distribute through performance pay, through the set dollar amounts for certified positions and a percentage for classified. That is how we normally do our performance pay or cost of living adjustment. So just the last couple years, we've had the additional funding that we did based on different percentages. This would be going back to, it's a 1% based on performance for every position.
If classified is included in that, we don't give performance pay to classified. Is that correct? So how would they be given that money?
Classified and
I'm
every
sorry, I'm just not
employee,
understanding.
actually, their increase is based on performance and on their evaluation. So if a classified person has a lower evaluation, the 1% would be reduced. So they do have, it's not performance award, but it's performance pay increases for the following year.
So the 1% is performance pay. It's not cost of living. I understand.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
The next item is implementing furlough days. So our calendar list is a little shorter because we talked about limiting that to employees that are 10 to 12 months. So the difference between a paid holiday made a difference to the employees back in 2013 when we did some adjustments to their work calendar, because I felt if the adjustment was made to a paid holiday, they lost a benefit. If we did it through a furlough day or where a day where they normally would work, they didn't work and they didn't get paid, they were happier. It was the same reduction in pay, but it was just the idea that you took away a paid holiday from me versus I got another day off and I didn't get paid. So just keep that in mind as you go through looking at paid, either paid holidays or the furlough days.
Can I ask a question about that, Wendy? So the furlough days, though, don't impact nearly as many employees, correct?
Correct.
Okay, it only impacts, as it says, the 10 to 12 months. So generally, well, I wouldn't say classified staff because there are classified staff on here like custodians, but teachers would not be impacted by furlough days.
Not in this plan, no.
Okay. Thank you.
The next item is to reduce the professional development awards or the performance awards for next year. So the teachers, coaches, specialists, coordinators, student advisors, and assessment staff, their top award is $4,400 and it would be reduced by $500. And then consistently with that same percentage, principals and assistant principals, directors and assistant directors would be $1,037 and executive directors $1,250. Okay. So the next section is just other options. So it may be an option that the restructuring committee came up with, but then as we talked about it, we talked ourselves out of it. It could be other ideas that I had, but just I wanted to throw them out for you to also consider. So the number of specials based on half the grade level, you'll see in the recommendation, the administrative recommendation is actually to go back to the 5.5 so that we do have consistent specials among the middle schools. That's why that was our recommendation. That's why that option is under other rather than the survey results or other options. A discussion came up about capping personal leave days. So our policy allows for 10 to 12-month employees to accrue personal time. At the end of the year, if it's over 100, the district buys back the days from those employees at the substitute rate for the first 10 days. So one recommendation was to cap that so no one would get over 100, or maybe look at allowing it to accrue, but not paying out more than 100 days when the person leaves. We currently, for 2020, we had 56 employees that received a payout at the end of the year for $43,000. So these are our long-term employees. There are some teachers in here. It's a combination of, we have classified employees in here, we have directors, we have teachers. So when I looked at the number of teachers, if they were going to lose the days and took sub, we had to pay a sub because they didn't want to lose their day. It's around 20 to 24,000. So the net savings is really only going to be around 20,000 if we were to do that. And that would be a policy change. So it would have to come back as a policy adjustment. In line with that, if we are not going to pay out the employees that are over 100 days of personal leave, then not pay out sick days over the 80 hours. So if you remember back to when the voters approved all of our sick pay, what we did is we reduced the personal days and moved it into sick. And so employees felt like we didn't give them any new days for sick days, those that already had a personal day plan. So we agreed that once it hit 80 hours, if they return the next year, anything over 80, we would put into their leave plan. And if an employee did not have a leave plan, we would pay those hours out at minimum wage. So I think to be consistent, if we look at one, we'd want to look at the other. Both have minimal impact, but it's still, I think we'd need to look at those together. Again, we have the phasing out of the full-time benefit incentive for the one crossing guard at each school. I did not put in a dollar amount because as we mentioned, it would be through attrition. So it could be years before we would see any savings. I went through purchase orders to see where we had high consulting bills. And the one was Studer that's paid from the Maintenance and Operations Fund. So I just wanted to add that to your list. So you could consider that. I know that was a board priority, but I wanted to have that for an option for you. Again, the inflation factor is 1.22 per the governor's plan. So if you feel that the inflation is likely, then you could put a 1 in that, and that would reduce the amount we need because we would be receiving inflation. We also currently prepay for our property casualty insurance. And we could delay that payment at the end of next year and pay it out of the 22-23 year. So we could just delay that payment a year, and that would make up 805,000 of that difference. And again, that's one of those changes we could make now or in a couple weeks. And then as we get through next year, if the funds are available, we could go ahead and prepay that.
So let me just clarify. It sounds like we're basically just robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're not going to pay it this year. We're going to take it out of next year's budget. And then right now, it seems like if we couldn't pay it for some reason, which is basically the choice you're asking us, we could postpone it. But once we do this once, there's no going back, because then you couldn't prepay it anymore, because you have to pay it twice in 1 year, which we could never afford to do. So this decision is fairly long-term.
Yes,
Correct.
so it is, it's like using your rainy day fund or the balance, the budget balance. You'll use it, and then it may take a while to be able to get that back. And then the last option I have for you, because I know you all are not as conservative as I am, is to use the rainy day funds. Currently, I anticipate about 14 million to be in the rainy day fund. Again, that is to prevent any major downturns. For example, this year, if we wouldn't have had any of that federal funding, we would have used that up, at least half of that up this year. And so that again is one of the savings that we have, is that rainy day fund. So as you consider that, in general, around $5,000 per student. So if you think we're going to go up 100 kids, you could put in 5,000 for 100 kids. Our kinders do count as half, but just another line for you to put in an amount that you would be willing to use of rainy day to start making these decisions and just move the process along. The next section is the administrative recommendation. So I'll leave it at that, and you can go through that information. If you have any questions, let me know. And then if you could email your spreadsheets to Amy and myself by March 10th, we'll collect that information and then make a recommendation on the 16th.
Can I ask a clarifying question, please, Wendy?
Sure.
So when I look at the administrative recommendations section, I see performance pay base increase, and then I see the final adjustment for the governor's 20% by 2020 plan. So administration is recommending the performance pay base increase, and the 20% by 2020 is happening kind of regardless, right? Or no?
So that is where I talked about the money was moved from 301 into the M&O base. So the current year, that's being paid from a stipend for the staff. I wanted to retain that, not knowing for sure what was going to happen with Proposition 301. I wanted to honor that increase. And so that is a recommendation that for our teachers, instructional coaches, and student advisors, the $600 go into their M&O base contract.
Okay, so tell me, if I say 0 on line 33 of the spreadsheet that says no performance pay increase for all employees, does that impact these lower recommendations? Are they still getting an increase?
No, that would take the increase away.
That takes both pieces.
No,
The-
it just takes only the 1% piece away.
And the 1% piece is that first thing that's in the admin recommendations.
Yes.
Because I'm not matching those numbers up. So that's, I think, but let me do
Now,
it.
there was a revised spreadsheet. So if you have an earlier version,
Okay, maybe I have an earlier version. Okay.
so yes, that was one of the corrections I made.
Okay.
So they still will be getting this $600 per employee.
That would be administrative recommendation. There is a column for comments. If you are concerned about any of our recommendations, you could put a comment in the comment
Well,
column.
what I'm really trying to get at is if I say that I am not, and I'm not saying I'm going to say this, but I'm just trying to get to all the scenarios here. So if I say I'm not in favor of a performance pay increase, does that mean teachers will have the exact same paycheck? Or will they actually be getting more money?
So for
Assuming benefits are the same.
assuming benefits are the same, we know we have a little bit of a change in retirement. But for teachers, the $600 would be, I'm not gonna say in addition to, it would be in their contract versus a stipend. And I do not have the new numbers for Prop 301 yet. So that would would be the final determination of overall if there's an increase or a decrease.
Okay.
But it is looking positive. Last year when COVID hit and the economy, their predictions were that it was going to be drastic reduction in sales tax. From what I'm hearing is it's a positive, but no indication of the amount of, would it be the same? Is it going to be lower because they're moving this $32 to M&O? At this point, we don't know.
So when do you need us to get to the 9.9 million, or you want us to just get as close as we can?
I would like to see you at the 9.9 million, even if that includes using rainy day. So you could use any of the items that are up there. If you want to say there's something you disagreed with our recommendation, you could put a comment down there that would just tell me that's your difference.
Okay.
So the number I'm seeing at the bottom of the administrative recommendations is not $9.9 million. So I'm just wondering what, kind of to Kim's point, what is that target number? If, are we just supposed to adjust based on this, what you have recommended here, or?
So the administrative recommendations total 4.6 million of the amount. And then these other options are for you to just look at the survey results. And then also, if you believe the inflation factor will receive that. And also if you are wanting to use any of the rainy day money. And then we'll bring back the final recommendation on the 16th.
So the administration has recommended 4.6 and the board can either take or leave those recommendations, and we need to come up with $5 million more based on the other factors in the spreadsheet.
So you could have comments on the administrative recommendations so that we could consider those. But the idea would be it's this top section that's interactive for board input to get to the 9.9.
Addition. Okay.
I have a question. Is there other things that we can consider? Because when we went through the survey and all the comments, there were some things that were mentioned that are not in here. So are we able to get some information about what that would mean, like what that would save? There was a lot of comments about how we're not doing any cuts at the admin level at the district office. There was comments about looking at a 4-day school week, which I don't know if that's something we'd want to consider, just so we know what that would look like and what the money savings would be.
So I'll take the first one. You'll notice on your recommendations, administrative recommendations, there are recommendations for position changes due to attrition, and we know some attrition is going to be happening. So transportation supervisors going from 2 to 1, an additional office staff in transportation, Grounds and shop, a tech 3 position, going from 13 techs to 12. And then also reducing district level staff by 1 position. So there are recommendations that include district level positions.
And my comment, Melissa, I'm not an expert on the entire process, but my comment on the 4-day work week is that really wouldn't save us any staffing costs, and that's our biggest expense. So although we might save some operational costs through doing that, it really would not get us anywhere near, but Wendy could speak to that better.
Superintendent Gunning, if you want to speak with that.
So that would be something that we would have to, I think it would take a long-term effect to even look at, because in talking to other districts, originally what we found is that it didn't necessarily impact the budget the way that they thought it would. Then you would have to look at too of how does that impact your minutes, your days. So a lot of those districts do not have like a fall break and different breaks and those types of things. So I think it'd be looking at so many different things of, because what I don't know from those comments is, are they thinking that the teacher works 5 days and the kids are only there 4? So then they have that 5th day of planning, or are they truly thinking of the 4 days, which means that it's a longer day for children and longer day for staff. So it would be it would be a year-long, I think, research of something we could definitely do if that was something that we wanted to really look at to see the cost benefits.
Another thing that I saw in these comments that I think is important, kind of Melissa, to your point, just to sort of clarify for people what, we are reading all of these, obviously, in that, pay increases or performance pay or any adjustments that are made there at any certified level affect administration the same way. So their amounts might be different because their pay rate may be different. But there were a lot of comments and, will there be any, sort of pay reduction for administrators or anything like that? It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if we give a pay increase across the board as certified, whether you're a teacher or an admin or in the district office, whatever that is, everyone gets the same. If we don't get it, admin is not going to get it, and teachers, and instead of teachers. So it's kind of, all of that is lumped together. If we decide to give a pay increase, everyone gets it. If we decide we cannot for some reason do that, nobody gets it. There's not different levels of you're going to get it, you're not going to get it.
Correct. That's the recommendation, that it all would go, or it would all be the same.
Correct.
Everyone either gets it or don't.
And it has been that way in the past.
Yes.
I mean, we don't have different performance pay levels for, specific groups of people other than based on the tiers that are already established.
Right.
Can you run through just we're supposed to email this to you by the 10th of March?
March
sorry.
10th, if you'll email it to Amy and myself.
Okay. And then next steps from there. I know you walked through the presentation. So we have 2 more opportunities, correct? One more opportunity for discussion. And then the next opportunity is we're voting on what these measures might be.
Correct. So that the
Okay.
16th meeting will bring back your input, administration ideas, discuss that. And then the following meeting would be the actual approval of the projected budget.
And that's in April. Or
March 30th,
okay, end of March.
because we would need to approve it before we issue contracts.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's important. I mean, this spreadsheet is great for us all to sort of get on an even playing field of what we want and what the priorities are, but I do think it's important for that full-fledged discussion of what those things are going to be before we just come back and vote for it, of kind of where everyone sits. And, as we hear different people's priorities, sometimes it makes you think about things that you didn't think about when you were doing this interactive spreadsheet. So I just want to make sure we have ample time as a group to have that open discussion.
Yes, and when it comes back for approval, there'll be the PowerPoint that will go through each of the items too.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Wendy or for Jody on this document? Okay, thank you very much, Wendy. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That is all we have for this evening. So if there are no other comments or questions on agenda items, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
I will second that. All those in favor?